Create Space, a podcast that finds joy in the art of storytelling. Now, as you all know, episodes have been a little sporadic lately, and I've had a lot of questions coming up for me regarding Create Space. Questions like, what is this show? What do I want it to be? Where does it fit in my life? More importantly, where does it sit in the priority list? Can I or am I doing it justice? And is it okay for me to have a podcast if I'm not, quote unquote, doing it correctly or doing it the way that people think I should be doing it or that I think I should be doing it? So I've had a lot of questions coming up for me about these things. And I have a few interviews that I recorded actually quite a while ago now that I've just sort of been sitting on, and I haven't edited and published them yet. And to sum it up, I've just been struggling with the fact that I love this show. I love creative storytelling, and I'm so happy when I'm working on Create Space. And also, I have this whole list of things that I feel like I'm not doing correctly, right? Things that I feel like I should be doing better, things that I'm just consistently getting into my own head about. So as I'm sitting here closing out spring semester and I'm processing all of these thoughts, I decide that it's time to get back into my audio files and start editing the next episode. And you guys, timing is so funny sometimes. I've literally been sitting on this interview for months, the interview you're about to hear today. And as I'm sitting here thinking things like, I love creating and I love storytelling and I love sharing moments of creativity with others, and how can I be more intentional about that? As those thoughts are swirling around in my brain, I realized that the next interview I have to edit is with my friend and former student, Freund. And I'm just so thrilled for you all to meet him today because his outlook on creativity and storytelling is so inspiring. That's really what drew me to Connor in the first place. No matter what is going on in his life, he's always creating in some capacity, right? So yes, sometimes he gets paid to create. Sometimes he does it for fun. Sometimes he does it to help process emotions or help build or grow a relationship. But no matter what it is, creation is a part of his world every single day. In good times and bad times and hard and easy times, it's always there. And it's not always in a super obvious or visible capacity, but it's always there. And I think that's where I'm at right now, right? I don't know if I can commit to weekly episodes or bi-weekly episodes or whatever else, right? I can't commit to doing this show, quote unquote, the right way or the way that someone thinks that I should. But I can commit to always continuing to intentionally be creative and engage in the storytelling process, because that will never be anything less than awe-inspiring to me, and it will always be a huge part of my life. And what's so funny, too, is that it took Connor and I so long to decide what we were going to talk about on this episode. And then it ended up being the most perfect topic for me right now. So as a bit of history, from the moment that I started this show, I knew I was going to have Connor on the show at some point. But where I got stuck was exactly what angle I should take with Connor. He and I have a lot of history it makes it difficult to really even know kind of where to begin or which story to tell. So we eventually decided to take the route or the perspective of lifelong creativity. We wanted to talk about the role that storytelling has played in Connor's life thus far and the way that it's shown up in so many different iterations at different phases throughout his entire life. And again, we recorded this interview a few months ago. So it's interesting how it's hitting me differently and it's providing some surprising impact as I'm editing it all together now and finally getting it published. And I just love when fate gets involved with timing. Sometimes things just align when you need them to, and that's what this episode is. And it's interesting because later in the interview, we actually talk about the timing of creativity and how important that can be. And what this episode has become for me is a beautiful and unexpected alignment. So I met Connor my very first year on faculty in the fall of 2018. I was brand new. I was just trying to figure out what I was doing. I was running on adrenaline and big dreams and imposter syndrome. And Connor was starting his junior year of college at Wichita State as an electronic media student. And he's one of those students that immediately made an impression. What I first noticed is that Connor loves to create. He loves to tell a story, to craft a compelling narrative, to visually illustrate something in a way that no one has ever seen before. And when I say he loves it, that's what I mean. It wasn't just that he was going to go to college to become a videographer because he thought that might be a cool career. It was that he could not live without creating. And I saw that immediately. So with that introduction, let's get into this interview. I am really excited. I can't wait for you guys to meet Connor. Today is an episode that I would say is, like 6 years in the making?
I would say so.
And I have a very special guest today. His name is Connor Freund. So Connor, first, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this for probably around 6 years. So there's a lot to unpack, and I don't know that we'll cover it all, but I'm excited to be here.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I knew I was going to have you on at some point, and even over the past 3-4 months, however long, we've been talking about it off and on.
Yeah.
And what we've kept coming back to is like the act of creation or the act of doing an art of any kind.
Right.
And what role that plays in a lot of different capacities. Could you start us out by telling us about your childhood, right? So what role did art and creativity or creating things play when you were younger?
Yeah. First off, great introduction, and I appreciate all of the gracious comments and everything of that nature.
You're
but
welcome.
It is so true, just the idea that I never saw any of this as I had to do it. I totally wanted to do it, and I think back to my childhood in that same kind of way. If you know me, you know that I love baseball, and that's where I feel like maybe this curiosity or creativity came from. I was always watching baseball, and it wasn't just watching baseball. It was like watching with my family, and then not just watching the sport, but also seeing everything as to the billboards that were in the stadiums, to how the production was being put together. At a young age, I didn't say, "Oh, I love this," not just because of the game, but because of the production. I wasn't thinking that.
Look at the sweet camera angles.
Exactly. But I was so drawn into it in the sense of from a production standpoint and like an advertising standpoint.
The environment that it built.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I fell in love with the sport obviously first, and then all of that came after that. I feel like from that, I would just as any kid does that loves something, they act it out or they play. In that case, I was playing baseball or playing wiffle ball, which I still do today.
Right.
But it's sounds weird, but almost like a playful mindset. I don't know. I feel like I'm still, I'm 26, but I feel like my brain and my body is constantly looking for something to create in a playful way, I guess.
I think that makes perfect sense.
It's weird because I can't watch a movie and just be engulfed in the story. I look at all the production I don't know if that's the right cut that I would have done there or whatever.
Right.
I'm constantly thinking through all of that, and I think that a lot of that stems from my curiosity of just watching a baseball production, watching on TV.
It's interesting that you mentioned that about it being playful because there was an episode that I did a while ago based on the book Creative Confidence, and something that they talk about in that book is that the idea that some people are creative and some people aren't isn't really accurate, that we all had creativity at some point.
Yeah.
And they said, and I can't remember I'd have to go back and fact check my notes here, but basically it was that in Tibetan, there is no word for creativity, but the closest that they have means natural. And so it was saying that creativity is more of coming home to a natural state of being that a lot of adults consider childish, and that's why they let it go.
Yes.
But a lot of us who embrace that still maintain that childish, playful mindset.
Absolutely.
And it helps in adulthood.
It absolutely helps. I'm not kidding. Today was literally having this conversation with Chuck, my coworker, who has a big influence on me, as you know. We were literally talking about how it's frustrating. Like, I don't know why I take it this way, but it's frustrating to me whenever I'm talking to someone and I show them, a logo that I made or a video that I created, and they're like, wow, you're so good. I could never do that. I'm not creative. And I'm like, okay, that's just not true.
Yeah.
This is such maybe a silly example, but why did you choose the clothes you're wearing today? You have all of these different things. There's got to be a reason why you chose that. You didn't just go into your closet and say, I'm going to pick this shirt, these pants. People will wear stuff for a certain purpose. You may not think that's creatively thinking, but you are, in my mind, it's not just, you're not a robot. Like,
right.
I feel like everyone has a creative bone in their body, whether they believe it or not. And I think it's kind of frustrating whenever people don't see that in themselves.
Yeah, they're exhibiting creativity even when they don't realize it.
Exactly. And I will say as well, I think it's a little bit different for you and I, because it's something that we're so ambitious and we love doing. We're passionate about it. A lot of people maybe aren't as passionate about it, but that doesn't mean that they're not creative.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not even that they're not passionate about it, but they are resistant to. If you're a fancy businessman,
yes.
you may not love the label creative.
Yeah.
So then you say innovative, which is the same thing.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
And that came from that Creative Confidence book, is they were like, yeah, innovative is the palatable masculine way to say creative,
yeah,
which I just thought was funny.
That is really funny. And that's a good point. It's funny that Chuck and I had that same conversation.
That's wild.
It is crazy.
And we'll talk more about Chuck later, because I want to bring him up, because
Absolutely.
I've never met Chuck, but I have loved hearing about the relationship and the art that you guys have created together. So stay tuned for that. So that's your kind of where things started for you. And then you ended up at Wichita State. How did you take this passion, this childhood playfulness, and how did you turn it into an academic and career trajectory? And how did the Elliott School help you do that?
Well, first off, the Elliott School, I'm going to kind of bounce around here, but the Elliott School, no doubt about it, just provided me the opportunities that I would have never had if I just said, I'm just going to try to do this thing straight out of high school. And not only that, but just how to be a professional in the sense of it all. I knew I loved creating. I knew I loved making videos. Even prior to Wichita State,
right.
One thing that I did in high school was I created their first ever newscast. We created this thing called Sedge What's Happening. So I went to Sedgwick, and it was just this essentially the news for the school.
Yeah.
And so I was editing and shooting everything just on an iPad. But in that moment, I realized this is what I wanted to do, because I was producing something that I could get that playfulness, that creative ideas out and push it out and show to people. And then whenever I got to Wichita State, it was I was so giddy to just get started whenever I had my first Elliott School class. I think my first class was with Kevin, and I just got in there and sat down, and I was like, all right, when are we starting? One of the biggest things that I always think back, that I honestly look back and I think that kickstarted my career professionally, was when you provided the opportunity to shoot at Ziggy's.
Yes. That's one of my favorite memories.
I mean, I'm not kidding. I look back at that, and I feel like that's the true starting point of where it all started. And then after that, it was opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. So I can't thank the Elliott School and yourself enough for all of that.
You know what's funny about that story is that I would say that was also, that was kind of the starting point for when you and I started to get to know each other.
Right.
Because it was the first time that we'd worked together outside of the classroom.
Uh-huh.
And it was also the first time, since it was my first semester, the first time I had worked with any student on an independent project like that. So it was pivotal for both of us that it was your first professional project, my first, guiding someone in this. And what is so hysterical to me is I don't think either of us knew exactly how impactful that was for the other person, because I remember when you graduated, I had gotten you a little graduation card, and I think you're the only person maybe to ever do this. I think I've gotten a couple cards maybe since then, but you made me a card to thank me, and both of us gave each other Ziggy's gift cards. We basically just exchanged money back and forth.
That's one of my favorite. Yeah, I remember that because there's a callback to. Maybe I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it was a new chapter in your life, and you trying to figure things out. We were both mirror images of one another in totally different.
Just 10 years apart.
Exactly. And I feel like that happens a lot with things that we go through in life, like
It does.
just you and I, which I think is just awesome.
I think the most recent one that we found out was when you were telling me, yeah, I'm going on my honeymoon soon. And I was like, oh, where are you going? And as it turns out, you went to not the same resort, but the same place that my husband and I went to 13 years prior.
I freaked out when she told me that.
That
I was
was
like,
so wild.
It was hilarious.
So you went through the Elliott School, and I will tell you one more thing, because you were so nice and kind about, opportunities that we helped create for you. I will say that there's a discussion that we have among faculty about how, there's like a top 10% of students who are going to succeed regardless of what I do. Even if I try to sabotage you, that 10%, they're going to be successful no matter what. And so I would say that, okay, I'll take a little credit for giving you opportunities, but you're one of those that falls in that top 10%. You were going to do it with or without us. It was going to happen no matter what.
I will say, though, it makes it so much easier whenever you have a curated plan through something like the Elliott School.
And you saying yes is a big part of that, too. That, when I think to all of the students that I've had who have gone on to be really successful, they are students who are willing to say yes, even when they are scared, even when they don't know for sure if they can pull it off, even when they're busy or tired or overwhelmed, they still say yes. And I think that's a big part of it too.
Oh, and I was for sure scared on more than over half of them.
I'm still scared
on anything
new.
No, absolutely. That's another reason why I feel like we have so much in common.
Right.
Imposter syndrome is real, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. So.
Some just call that anxiety, but hey.
That's true.
Self-awareness, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So let's move on to, you've been in the professional world now for about 3.5 years-ish. Yep. And for me, that's the part where I don't know as much, right? That you left our hallowed halls, so to speak. So I know we've still kept in touch. I still get to see what you're doing on social media. We meet up for coffee every few months, whatever. But that's the part where I stopped getting to see you every day,
right.
So tell us a little bit about what you have been through and how you've grown in the past 3.5 years since graduation.
Absolutely. So I've stayed on at Wichita State working at the Alumni Association, which I can't thank them enough for all the opportunities that they also provided. I felt like in that time frame from graduating amidst the pandemic that they allowed me to challenge myself and challenge some of the things that were not normal in that sense. None of us knew what was going on during the pandemic, so that was kind of the era of when I really first got into the workforce, having the Alumni Association be there. And then I found an opportunity with KSN News Channel 3 here in Wichita, and that has just been honestly life-changing in opening my eyes to so many different things other than just videography. My eyes have just been opened so much to 3D animation, to logos, to graphic design, to After Effects work, to even shooting pictures. I don't do it a whole lot, but the opportunities that KSN has provided in the position that I'm in, I'm the promotions producer, so I do a lot of the commercials and promotions that you see on TV and a little bit of social media as well. It's just opened up my tool bag that much more. And I think having a place like that is beneficial for anybody, but I feel like it's like this position is almost molded to my wants and needs, my ambitions, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I think that's what keeps, that's what keeps a creative in a job right there. I remember you being nervous about, I haven't worked in news. I don't know that I I don't know that that's what I want to do.
Right.
And then they saw what you were capable of and they helped you optimize that.
Yes.
That brings us, we mentioned earlier that we were going to bring Chuck back up.
Yes.
Now is the time to bring Chuck back up.
Cue in Chuck.
So what I've loved, the stories I've heard about Chuck, what I love about him is that we all know that as a young person in the workforce, having somebody to kind of take you under their wing or to be a mentor for you or to help guide you is so incredibly important. And I have loved seeing you be able to find that at the station. So tell us about Chuck. What's your guys' relationship like? How did that happen?
Yes. So when I interviewed and I went to KSN to interview for this position, it was more or less, is this going to be beneficial for both parties, obviously.
Right.
And I thought that was a huge thing in general, like going into it, I thought that was awesome. And so I got to meet Chuck, and Chuck is the creative art director at KSN. So he does literally all of the news graphics, all of anything that is moving and has graphics. Chuck is the guy. Like, he's literally the guy, and he's been there. He's been at KSN. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it's been over 20 years.
Wow.
So he's had 20 years of experience in motion graphics, graphic design, logos, all of that stuff.
All of those things that you were interested in but didn't necessarily have the foundation in yet.
Exactly.
So perfect fit for you.
Absolutely. And so when I got into the position, I immediately started soaking up whatever I could from Chuck. And to be honest, it's one thing to like go into a job and then, I gotta meet these people first and then do it. I felt so comfortable going to him because I knew of this wealth and knowledge that Chuck had, 20 years of experience, and I've seen everything that he's done. Like, this is crazy to think. Even when I was a kid, I remember like some of he's shown me animations that he's done, and I remember them watching them on KSN News 3 when I was a kid. And I was like, it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm meeting my idol, because I didn't know that this was Chuck.
Right.
But it was just eye-opening to know that. So that we started bonding over that, and there's a lot of parallels like you and I have between Chuck and I. And so to keep this, long story short, I just opened up my toolbox and I said, Chuck, can you help me sharpen these knives? One thing that he always says to me is, whenever I get frustrated, I'm like, he will get something and have it done in 30 to 45 minutes. That's a graphic that I would be working on for half a day.
Right.
So when I talk to him and I'm like, I would love to be able to get a little bit quicker. Like, how do you know all this stuff? Especially Photoshop. He's really great with all the keyboard shortcuts and everything. And one thing that he always has told me is like, you can want to know all this and you possess that you want to know all this knowledge, but it just takes time.
Right.
And I always look at Chuck because he's been there for so long. He has all of this knowledge, but I don't look at him like any different from you or I, or, I feel like he and I have this type of bond or this type of thing where it's like, I can just ask him whatever I want and he will help me with that.
You're not like intimidated by his experience or expertise or anything like that.
And maybe at the beginning I probably was, but the longer that I've been there, but it's like, hey, can you help me with this animation? I don't quite what's the best way to do this?
Right.
And he'll just sit down, and a lot of times, this is funny, I think you'll get a kick out of this, is I'll go into his office and I don't quite understand what I'm trying to explain or like what I want to know. And he will literally say, all right, pull up a chair. And it's like a live YouTube video. So he sits down on Blender or After Effects and he'll say, okay, here's this, we'll do this. And it's like, it takes him 10, 15 minutes. And he takes the time out of his day to do that.
Yeah.
And I think he enjoys it. I know he enjoys it. So I think it's Chuck's awesome, bottom line.
That's a huge testament. I mean, everything that you've just said is a huge testament to him, because not everybody who has that much experience is that open to sharing that.
Right.
And certainly not everybody who has that much experience is patient enough to meet you where you're at because in reality, what I'm hearing here is that Chuck's a teacher. Man, Chuck needs to be in the classroom. Because meeting you where you're at, even when you don't know how to ask what you need to ask, is such a skill.
Well, I think it's really funny, and I've mentioned this to him. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I kind of feel like when I got to KSN, it was almost like, I had you throughout my college career as a mentor, and it was almost like you and him met up in an imaginary world and you passed the baton and said,
I love that so much.
Here, take him and show him graphics. Like, you guys.
Maybe we did do that. Maybe I've known him this whole time and I never told you. Okay,
that would be a wild. That'd be a
that
wild
would be
story.
weird.
That would be weird. But that's just what he means to me, and he's just a freaking creative man, like one of the most creative people I know. So
as you and I were talking about the angles that we wanted to take on this episode, and it's something that I have touched on in this episode many times before, is that creativity and storytelling. can be a community builder. It can be a coping tool. It can be something that is fun and exciting. And it can also be something that helps us through really either sad or weird or chaotic times. So I think for me, when I think of what you have been through since I've known you, what jumps out to me is COVID.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, you were a 2020 graduate. So your last 3 months, or 2 months, I guess, of college, it was like everything that you dreamed was about to happen got squashed immediately. I mean, all of our students felt that, and all of our students reacted in different ways. And what I noticed is that some students, and not just you, but several other students in your class and a couple years younger than you, embraced that and used that as fuel. And some students, I mean, sadly, kind of used it to give up. They used it, I mean, it blocked them, you know, and nothing against them for that. I mean, that was a really big deal. Like, I get it. But tell me about how you pushed through that and how your art helped you when your whole world was turned upside down.
Absolutely. So actually, I'm really glad you brought up this, and maybe this was the segue you were hoping to get into, but that time period was such a weird time because I did graduate, but it
didn't feel like it, did it?
Didn't feel like I graduated.
You didn't walk?
And it was like all of these, you know, I don't even remember what my last project was, but it was like, wow. It was like some random Thursday or something like that, and it was like, it's like over. It's like,
and then it was just over.
It's just over.
And you were still in your house.
Exactly. It was really strange. So one thing that got me through that was Alex, my brother, and I mentioned how as a kid I would play wiffle ball all the time. I feel like this was one of the only things that I felt comfortable with, like going out and like I had to get out of the house at some point.
Right.
And so we started this little wiffle ball league with Alex and I and then a few of my other buddies, and we called it Wheat State Wiffle Ball. And so we would play weekly because at that point it was like, okay, after work, everybody just head to College Hill Park and we'll play. And it was really cool, just to set the scene just a little bit. That park was so filled with people. It, like, my childhood dreams like came true that day because we were playing down by these tennis courts where it was like concave down. And we had all these people just watching us play wiffle ball. And I felt like I was like in the major leagues or something.
That's
playing,
so cool.
Playing wiffle ball.
Everybody was outside at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all we could do.
Exactly. And so the pandemic, what I thought was we were going to play wiffle ball for a few weeks and then we'll get back to normal life, I think, as a lot of people did. And once I realized that, I was sitting on all of these ideas because backtrack a little bit. For this wiffle ball league, I created these logos for each team. I took it way overboard, and I'm proud to say that I did. Some people think it's I love it. It's kind of funny, but
you've had some people pay you for logos now.
Yeah,
many people.
That's true.
So
yes.
I mean, it may have started overboard, but it grew.
Yeah, and so I was making these logos, and then we started making these videos of us just playing wiffle ball, and then Alex threw in this idea of we were having these ideas of like we just wanted to talk. Like after we got done playing wiffle ball, we'd sit around and just talk. Just talk about whatever. Like we would just sit there in this parking lot just talking because what else were you going to do? Like it was COVID, whatever.
Right.
And so Alex and I were like, we got to create something. I was like, well, I love this whole Wheat State wiffle ball. I love Wheat State. Alex and I both love creating. Okay, let's do a podcast and let's name it Wheat State Creates.
Which is so great.
And so we have Wheat State Creates. We're not as consistent on the podcasting side of things, which I'll get into a little bit of that if we have time.
Sure.
But essentially, that's where Wheat State Creates comes from. And now it's this medium for whatever I feel is that I want to create. I can throw it at Wheat State Creates, and that's just my platform to just create whatever it is, from wiffle ball to logo design to podcasting, like whatever I need to itch inside my creative brain, I just throw it at Wheat State Creates.
Absolutely.
And so
it's like the umbrella for your passion projects.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what CreateSpace is for me, so I feel that.
Exactly. And I love that we both have create in there as well.
I know. I didn't realize that until right now. Like I didn't think about it until right now. I was like, yeah, we both did.
Pretty cool. So during COVID is where I kind of had this brainchild. Alex and I really,
Yeah, because Alex is very creative as well.
Absolutely.
In kind of different ways than you are. I feel like so you guys are pretty complementary.
I would say so. Yeah, his is more painting and abstract art and poems and poetry, and so during COVID is really where I started to realize like I don't have to just have a job to do all of this stuff. I can do it. I was already doing it, but it wasn't really underneath an umbrella.
All right, so let's move on a little bit. I want to move to talking about your storytelling and creativity as specifically a way to cope with grief. And I know we're both worried that this is going to be a hard part of the episode for us to record, but I think it's important. And again, we've talked on this on the podcast before. Back in, I think it was episode 3 that I had Ed Baker on. And actually also I cried through that entire interview. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if I've grown since then in my emotional regulation. But it is not uncommon art therapy exists, right? Music therapy exists. As a way of coping with difficult emotions, art is something that we have used. And I think that's something that you have used. So
absolutely.
Just a couple months after I met you, you experienced tragedy, which I didn't hear much about. I mean, I knew about it because you said you were going to be missing class, but it wasn't until like after we got to know each other that you started talking about it. And I would say a few years until you started using art to embrace those big feelings. So tell us about that.
I also think this is kind of an interesting take as well, like how I mentioned how Chuck and you, I feel like secretly met.
Right.
I feel like you and my granddad somehow secretly had a conversation.
Love that.
So I just had met you. My granddad had passed during that time when I was a junior, and he lived just a fantastic life, and he was 90 years old, so it's not like his life was cut short by any means.
Right.
But he was a father figure to me growing up, and it was something that I wasn't looking forward to, as many people do. It's like losing their grandparents or losing their mom or dad or just anyone that they're close to. Mm-hmm. And so when that happened, I feel like I kind of not lost, but my creative brain was shut off for quite some time.
Almost numbed. Kind of.
Almost numbed to the sense of just I felt like I was my least creative person in that time period, and so I know like a few months, maybe a year after he had passed, I had mentioned him multiple different times, and I remember this conversation very vividly in your office. We were talking about my granddad, and you were saying this seems like it would be the perfect opportunity to do a documentary on.
That's right.
And so during that, when you said that, it was almost like my brain like clicked again for like the creative side of things.
Turned back on?
Yeah, it turned back on. And so I had that idea of doing that for so long. I had pictures, I had video, I have all of this great stuff that I captured of my granddad. And of my grandma too. She's still alive. Just all of these awesome memories that I had with my grandparents. And so actually coming to the present day now, just looking back, I've started on that documentary, but I've always like given myself a hard time for not being able to like actually start or finish that documentary. But there's been a lot of little, I would consider them little, but maybe other people don't. I've done some other things to honor my granddad in those times of missing him.
Absolutely.
And so there's even actually before he even passed, I would make videos with him all the time. Like for some of the Elliott School classes that I had, I did a short documentary on him and why he loves playing golf.
Was that for Kevin's class?
That was Kevin's
That's what
class.
I was thinking.
Yeah. So that was one of them. And then I, just as a passion project, I did a love story between a little documentary about my grandma and my granddad and how they met and everything like that. And so I have that I made prior to him passing. And so long story short, I felt like I was forcing myself to try and start this documentary when things weren't, my feelings and my grief it still is even to this day. I give myself too much of a hard time to not start or finish that. But some of the things that I have done for him in honor of him is first off, this isn't something that I guess I did kind of create it, but I have a tattoo on my chest and it says "We'll pull him through," and that's him talking about the Cardinals. Talking about the Cardinals. So I got that tattoo to remind me that he's kind of always watching the Cardinals with me.
Is that something you guys shared a lot before?
Yes.
And how soon after his passing did you get that?
Probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 months maybe.
Gotcha.
I had him write his name like 10 years prior to him even passing. And so I knew that at some point I wanted something once he was kind of gone. And Alex got a tattoo as well. He'd always tell a joke about a cat and a candle around Christmas. Kind of an inappropriate joke, but which I won't say. But Alex got a candle, and it says his initials just below it. So that was something that Alex and I kind of bonded over. But that was one of the things. And then as far as like the actual creative side of things, I still play wiffle ball with some of my friends throughout the summer. We just recently bought a house, and in the backyard we play wiffle ball. And so I still have that, like I said, that playful energy. And so I named the field that we play on Lambeth Field, which Lambeth was my granddad's middle name.
Oh, wow.
And so
I did not know that story.
Yeah, and so I created a logo with his middle name as it. And funny story, as we're on that topic, he always said, if you name your first kid Lambeth, I'll give you $100. That's when we were a kid, and so we were all like, "Oh, that's such a bad name." Like we'd always give him crap for his middle name, and so now I did that just because I don't think I'll be naming my kid Lambeth at all. You
have to clear that with your wife.
Yeah,
first.
exactly.
But you got a field.
Exactly, a field, and I think he would be more excited about that probably than the latter. So.
He might go, "Oh shoot, you called my bluff. I didn't expect you to really do that. This poor kid."
Exactly. So there's just been many other things. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's just been things that I for sure like talking about him on a podcast at some points and stuff like that. Just there's been some other things. I guess Chuck and I are working on a passion project right now. I won't get into too much of the details, but one of the characters is a golfer, and he's looks not just like my granddad, but he's dressed like my granddad with the bucket hat. Yeah, based on granddad. So
he shows up in a variety of ways.
Exactly.
And I think, to me, that's the point, is that creativity's timing isn't necessarily your timing, your plan, right?
Exactly.
I think things come about and ideas come to fruition when they're supposed to. So I think that you are finding ways to explore your granddad's life in the timing that works for you and in the timing that works for your life. And I know you're going to make that documentary. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you made it now, I don't know that it would be what it's supposed to be. I think the perspective that you need maybe isn't there yet.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've struggled a little bit with that idea as well, is I think that, like what you just said, is creativity has its own timing. Like it's just like with any project that you're doing that's passion, if the fire's not burning within you to create that sort of logo or that video or whatever the case is, I feel like it's not the time to do that. And you're going to know that, but with this specific thing, there's with grief, it's a battle, I feel like, with anybody that's gone through anything like that. There's the guilt side of things, and some people maybe they don't have the creative side of things tugging. So it's almost like my own self, my guilt and creativity, battling it out. And talking about it here, I think, has just what you had said is like, and I've talked to Megan as well, my wife, about it, and she's like, there's no time frame on it.
Absolutely.
There's just no time for it.
Yeah, it's not like a work project. No one's saying you have to publish this.
Exactly. And I think that...
I'm so glad she told you that.
Yes. And she was the first person to tell me that, because I've had conversations where it's like, I've just sat there at the computer and just... I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big project to me, and but I can look at all of the little things that I've done, and the main reason why I feel guilty is because I want to make sure that people know just how great of a guy my granddad was.
Right.
And this even is another creative thing that can help shine that through.
And he knows.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but you'll always be chasing that of trying to honor him in the best way that you can.
Exactly. And I think that this conversation, as well as past conversations, it's on creativity's timeline at this point.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes I do this. I don't know if you do, but I use that as an excuse, like, oh, I can't get this project done. The creativity is not flowing. And we can't do that in our jobs. We can't do that, in some ways. Yeah. But for something like this that literally, as Megan said, there's no timeline here. You've got all the time in the world. Let it take the time that it needs, because then when you're done, then you're done.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Enjoy the process. Of all the projects to enjoy the process, this is the one.
Yeah. And I think that's just it, is that there's the side of grief, just for anybody out there, there's this side of grief where the sad side, then the happy side, and it's a tough battle, because it's almost like creativity and grief should be in a boxing ring or something, fighting
They're kind
out.
of two sides of the same coin a little bit. Yeah.
Because it's almost like they both have to just line up correctly.
Yeah.
The grief has to be so far to the middle that the creativity is still on the right, but then it meets up in the middle. So that's just timing of everything.
It's important.
Just gotta let it be.
And I'll say, if you're someone who is a natural kind of creative, like Connor or myself, we talked about what Megan told you, and something else that you and I have talked about over the years is that we both married very logical, rational people.
Yes.
And if you can do that as a creative, man, that's helpful. I don't know how many times you and I have talked through a topic, and then one or the other of us are like, well, Jamie said this, or you'll say, well, Megan said this, and all of a sudden we're both like, whoa, why didn't we think of that?
Exactly.
They just level us out in the best way. And I love when I see pairings like that are so darn complimentary.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
I give a whole heck of a lot of credit to Megan, because when I'm in a creative funk, or even I'm just trying to figure out a problem with a logo between a client and I, it's like, I know what I want. And then Megan comes in and she's like, well, if you look at it this way, and maybe they just need to see it in this perspective instead of maybe the way that you have it. So maybe just try it. That's just an example. It's she opens up the logical side of my brain that is usually closed off because it's all creative.
Yeah. I feel like the way that I sometimes explain it is Jamie, my husband, is able to stop the hamster wheel for me.
There you go.
You know what I mean? I've got this spinning and the ideas are floating around, but nothing's forming up, and he can just kind of stop the hamster wheel and just let things meld together. That's
a really good way of putting it, because maybe for a bunch of creatives, I don't know, if not all of them have, I feel like this constant spinning wheel of once it stops, it's okay, that's where that creative idea is going to go.
Right.
But if it's stuck on autopilot, you can't,
Yeah.
Then it's it's good to have a wife or a husband say, I'm going to stop that hamster wheel for you.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know. Yeah, we need those people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We get weird otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what would you say, we've spent some time talking about how awesome and I won't say non-creative, but the people who are more driven by logic and rationality than we are. But what about this? Let's say someone who doesn't feel like they're creative, somebody who has never used art as an outlet, goes through something, and they kind of think, you know what, I think I want to try this. I think I want to try painting as a hobby. I think I want to try knitting. I think I want, whatever. But they don't know where to start. They don't know how to bring creativity into their world in a meaningful way. And they're not prepared to go off and change their career and become a painter. Do you have any guidance or advice, or what would you say to someone who's at that brink?
That's a really good question. So
I don't have an answer to it, so I'm hoping you do.
Well, I'm just thinking it through because I'm going to use an example that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse. If they're looking at some sort of, let's say they want to get into logo design or just Photoshop or something like that, where let's say they want to up their photo, they take photos of their kids or something like that, and they want to, make just a poster or something. I don't know.
Yeah, make the quality a little better.
Something like that. It may not be the right way to start, but I mean, YouTube's your best friend. I mean, that's probably a really cliche true though. Cliche thing to say. But as far as like the mind, I think if you have something on your mind and you're like questioning, am I going to be judged? Is this going to take too much time? Is this going to be against the societal norms of being an adult?
Am I being too childish?
Am I being too childish in a sense?
Right.
Just lean into it, because if you get into it and you're like, this is uncomfortable, I'm not good at this, you are still trying to be creative. You may not get there, but you may get into it and you're like, okay, this isn't for me. There you go.
That's okay.
Now you dipped your foot into the water.
Yeah.
But maybe you dip your foot in and then you fall in and you're like, this is amazing. I want to learn more. Well, you just unlocked whatever itch you were trying to scratch, whether that be knitting or logo design or crocheting, whatever the case is.
Right.
Like, just if you have it in your mind, if it's been brewing in your mind for that long, or even if it's just an idea in your head, just take action.
Give it its moment.
Give it its time. Take some time and set some time apart from your busy schedule and just sit there with it. Sit there and try it. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
You don't like it, at least you tried it.
It's an experiment.
Exactly.
I would add on to that I think in this day and age, we have a lot of times there's a mindset that in order for something to be valuable, it has to be monetized, or you have to be good at it. And sometimes being able to let that go, saying, hey, I want to paint because it's fun, I may never be a good painter.
Right.
That's honestly okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's hard.
It is actually very hard, and I will even speak from my own experience. So Chuck and I, going back to Chuck, we did a thing called Inktober, and that was 31 days of sketching or drawing on your iPad from a prompt that's given daily.
Oh, cool.
And this was something I wanted. I've never been good at sketching. I've never been good at just starting on a blank sheet of paper. I've always ran to Illustrator or Photoshop, and I've started with, I feel more comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
I was doing this on my iPad. Chuck was doing it on his, on just a more traditional pen and paper, or pencil and paper. Chuck is a crazy good sketcher, just crazy good. And I've seen his work before, and so I challenged myself to do this for 31 days. And I definitely got better while doing that. And so I still am not the best, but I enjoy doing it. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this to show it. Sometimes I'll post them on Wheat State Creates Instagram or just my own personal stuff. But you should just look at my iPad and see all the sketches that half of them aren't finished. Some of them are. But it's the fact that I'm enjoying. I will sit there for an hour, hour and a half and just sketch away, and then I look at the final thing. I'm like, that's not very good, but I enjoyed what I just did.
Yeah.
And it's an experience. So
yeah, creating for yourself is wildly underrated.
Yes, and you're right. People, if there's no monetization, if they think, oh, if I'm not going to get paid for this, then why should I even be doing it?
Is it even worth it? Yeah.
Yeah, that is where you're blocking yourself.
Yeah.
That's where you're blocking yourself.
Absolutely. And we have a hustle culture where it's cool that everything can be monetized.
Absolutely.
It's great that we have these avenues, but doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't always. I mean, and I struggle with that sometimes with the podcast. Is that yes, of course, it's public. I mean, I am publishing these. I love seeing the views go up. I love seeing the reactions and things of that nature. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, I'm doing this for me, right? Like it is a passion project, and I will always see it that way, even when those view counts start to get in my brain.
Right. No, and I can tell you firsthand that we had a conversation about that exact thing.
Right.
And sometimes I will post one of my most prized possession sketches that I've done, and I will get 1 or 2 likes. And it's like, I look at I do the same thing. I get in my head, I'm like, well, nobody else thinks it is. Should I keep doing this?
Right.
But that part of it is imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Because it's like, well, there's about a million other people better than me, but there's also a lot of people that haven't even tried or done what I just did. So you should be proud. And the fact is, you're having a good time right now. Mm-hmm. I have a great time sketching. I'm not that great at it. You're very good at this. So I just think it's if you're not willing to try something, or if you have a roadblock, take the roadblock and just try it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all challenging.
It is challenging, but I think having these conversations will only help us, you and I, as well as other creatives and people that want to be creative. Mm-hmm. I think it will allow us to have it be more in the front of our minds of why do you do this? Why do I sketch? Why do I make logos? Because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's not my job. I'm not at work. I can just do. That's what We State Creates is all about. I've had some people say, "You're doing too many different things." That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Create away. I think everyone that wants to do something like that, just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just the way that I look at it, I guess.
If I think of that statement, that goes back to the first thing I said, which is what jumped out to me about you. You love to create things. You love to make art. And that is going to be the driving force for you forever, I feel like.
Yeah.
And most of the time that's where I fall as well. And maybe that's why I was drawn to you, is because I am like that and I want to be like that, but a lot of times the world tries to push that out of us,
Yeah.
And so when you see someone embracing that, it feels really good, and it makes you want to embrace that. And I think that's why we create so well together.
Oh yeah,
because we
sure.
can feed off of each other in a way that sometimes you can't, with other people.
Or even just by yourself.
Right.
I create so well with Chuck, and I am so much more versatile working with Chuck because he makes me more ambitious. He makes me want to just go crazy. I'm constantly thinking of new things, and so.
Well, we are at 59 minutes, so right under an hour, and I want to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Again, this is something that we've been thinking about making for so long, and I'm super honored that it's finally happening. Like, this is huge for me. You're someone that I will always connect with my first year of teaching. I adjuncted before that, but when I think of that first year, you are always at the forefront of my mind. And so you made the first 2 years so fun. You helped me figure out what the hell I was doing as an instructor. I don't know that you knew you were doing that at the time, but I think in a weird way, I built my confidence through watching you succeed, right? And again, that's not me saying I'm taking credit for your success, but being able to walk through that with someone as talented as you are in the beginning was really helpful for me. You were not a challenging student, right? Like you did not make it hard for me. So that was really, really helpful. And then you also, and this is the part that I will try to get through without tearing up, you and your cohort of students were the first time that I experienced the heart drop of graduation. I had never done that before. I hadn't taught before. I was used to coworkers, right? You work with coworkers, and then every now and then they leave. But it doesn't happen every year. And so that was the first time where I was like, oh my God, I spent every year or every day with these people, and especially you, and now you guys are gone and you're leaving, and it was COVID, and so it was even weirder.
Yeah.
And since then, I have felt that heart drop often. I have lost many amazing students, several of which have been on the show. And it's not any easier, but I'm more experienced at it now. So it still feels wildly different from losing you, right? It feels different from that.
Yeah.
And since then, 3.5 years, right, I've gotten to see you become a news producer. I've gotten to see you get engaged, get married, buy a house, and all of these things. Like, watching you guys grow up is the best part of my job, and it will always be the best part of my job. I love it so much. So thank you, I think, for being one of the best students we've ever had. And I can tell you, every faculty member here would agree with that. Thank you for living openly and sharing everything that you share through your art, through your creativity, being willing to get on this show with me and just talk. I mean, that's not something everybody would be willing to do by any means. And thank you for showing the world the profound impact that storytelling can have. Because when I come back to the point of this podcast, that's it. Right? Storytelling has an impact. Storytelling builds community. It builds connection. It builds friendships. It builds relationships. And you are a testament to that. We are a testament to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Everything that comes from the Elliott School is a testament to that. So you helped us build the community in the Elliott School. You literally helped me build the gear room. You helped all of us tell our story together. And it's something that I think that we all feel honored and privileged to have been a small part of your journey.
Huge part, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I can't use the word honor enough. It means so much to me to have you back here. I will have you back, let's do like a Connor episode every few months. Like, let's just
I
keep
would
it
totally
rolling.
be down.
I
would
love
totally
it.
be down.
Well, thank you to you. Thank you to everyone listening, everyone watching, whatever it is that you're doing. It's been a privilege, and I will see you all next week on Create Space.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.